Welcome to the Zesty Ginger podcast. We are Megan and Dr. Alex. We are here for transformation. Yours, ours, and the collective. Personal and professional for practitioners. But not just any transformation. Compassionate transformation. Because between the two of us, we have seemed to have done things the painful way. Let our pitfalls become your stepping stones. We aren't afraid to share our raw and vulnerable truths in order to help you transform your thinking, your body, your heart, and your soul. Combining 15 years of functional medicine with brain-based habit change to lead you to the best life possible in a compassionate way. Compassion, yes, yet plan to roll up your sleeves. Transformation requires your participation. And a quick reminder, this information is not meant to diagnose, manage, or treat disease. Always consult with your doctor, not this doctor, before making changes. Now let's get into the episode. Hello everybody. Dr. Alex here with you. We have a very special episode today, and that is because we have a guest. It is Jamael Harris, and he is joining us today. This episode is a prequel, essentially, to a masterclass that Megan and I are inviting you to. And it is all about money and the creation, the money mastery that you have in your life. So essentially today we're going to talk about how you're miscreating money. And there's going to be a lot of takeaways here, and it's going to lay the groundwork for the masterclass. So to join us for that, go to zestyginger.com/money. Or as always, you can go to the show notes down below and you just follow it there. You'll be able to sign up, and you definitely want to make sure that you get signed up because there's going to be an audio that you're going to get along with the masterclass that you'll be able to listen to and follow along with afterwards. And that's going to really help you create in the way that you desire. So make sure that you go and get all registered for that, and that's coming up. So, to introduce Mr. Jamael Harris, he is joining us. This is a good friend of Megan and I. We met Jamael, what was it, 2020?
2021, I think.
2021, and we met in Jim Fortin's transformational coaching program. It's called TCP. And so Jamael became my financial advisor, and we've really come to work closely together on this stuff because what Megan and I love so much about working with Jamael is that he brings something that's very unique to the table with financial advising, which is he brings both the practical aspects and all the woo that all of us know and love so well. So you get to bring kind of all of the good money practices and the actual tangible things that really matter in with the mindset, beliefs, creation, all of those topics that are so important but can be really tricky to merge in a way that actually gets you results, which is what we're all obviously really after. So that's why we're having him. So Jay, tell us a little bit more about how you got into this, a little bit more about yourself.
Awesome. Well, thanks for having me, first of all. And I was not looking to be a financial advisor, actually. I used to work at Walmart. Well, I went to college and I got my degree because that's what you're supposed to do.
That's what we hear.
I got my degree in business, and I've always wanted to go in business, so I just didn't know what I wanted to do. And I was working at Walmart at the time as a store manager, and a friend of mine, they were having a financial seminar at my church, and nobody came. And so my mom made me the seminar. And so I was introduced to financial concepts that I'd never heard, especially being that I went to college. And so I was like, man, there's something to this. And so I became a client, and over time I decided to become an advisor just from what I've learned and just a little information that I had at the time. It made me decide to go into the field. And so now I've been doing it about 20 years, and it's a lot of fun, and it's very, very needed. And so, so I'm happy to be here.
Yeah, awesome. Well, thank you so much for being here. Tell us a little bit about how the woo snuck in. Like, what happened there?
The woo?
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know. I met the woo on accident.
Don't we all?
TCP was the first interaction I've ever had with the woo, and so when I got in that class, it was just something different than I've ever heard, and I felt like it resonated with my spirit. But yeah, I mean that's kind of where it all started, and we've been wooing ever since. And so I don't really know what you wanted me to say about that, but yeah.
No, that's cool. That was the I mean, because 20 years you're going along, you're like doing your thing, and then all of a sudden here comes the woo. So I'm sure we'll get into kind of the specifics of the woo as we talk here. But yeah, definitely, I don't think any of us really know where the woo comes from. All right, so we have a couple really important points here that we got prepped for the conversation that we wanted to bring to you today. But before we do that, we really were discussing the importance of a really key mindset thing that people need to bring to the discussion when we're talking about money and we're talking about creating or miscreating the results that we want. The thing that makes money such a complex topic sometimes, and why we're doing it over, multiple episodes and masterclasses and all of this stuff, is that a lot of this conversation will ask us and will necessitate you to embrace the and. And what that means is that there's a lot of concepts that in order to create the results that we want with the impact, and of course that includes money, is that you have to hold as truth two separate ideas that seem contradictory but can exist at the same time. Now, some of them we flow between, and some of them can just coexist at the exact same time. But whether or not we're flowing between them at any given time or not, they both really exist still at the same time. And so from the get-go, we want you to just get your thinking head on in that way, and that if you hear things that sound contradictory to you in this discussion, good, because that is pointing you towards a truth that is likely underrepresented in your world right now. And once you figure out the embracing the and portion of that, that will lead you to creating the kind of money results that you're really going after. So that first and foremost, now that's a big ask, and we know that.
I like that.
Right? Embracing the and we've talked about that on the podcast episode. If you haven't listened to that particular podcast episode that we have, I believe it's in season 16, you can go back and follow this episode up with that. But long story short, these ideas are complex, and we're just going to go and acknowledge that from the get-go. So we're going to break things down as we go into the practical and woo, because we're just going to keep it right on target. So there's two big categories when it comes to money, right? Why do people listen to podcast episodes like this? It's because you're not where you want to be. Right. So most of the time you have the awareness of something's up. And so there's two big categories that are going to fall into. It can be an either or an and situation here too. So it can either be I'm not making it, as in I'm not bringing in the money that I want. Or number two is I make it, but then it goes away. Something always happens. Or I make it and I just am not growing it at all. It's not really doing as much as I want to do it for me. So you can either be relating to one of those, or you could really be relating to both. And I think probably, Jay, you see this play out all the time with what people are dealing with. How do you generally see people talking about this and realizing where they're at with it?
Yeah, I mean, I think the 2 points that you brought up, like people struggling with making money and keeping it and growing it, it's the same answer. I think it's education. I think a lot of times we're not educated on that there's more than one way to make money. I think a lot of us we're taught to go to school, go to college, and get a good job. And so we think that's the end all be all, but there's so many different ways that you can make money today, whether it's getting on YouTube, whether it's coaching like what you guys are doing, whether it's being an advisor like what I do. I mean, there's so many different things that you can do. And so I think as far as the making it is getting educated on the fact that there is a lot of different ways to make money, and then the keeping it and growing it is the same answer is just getting educated on how money works. Most people just don't understand it. And it's unfortunate that we don't learn this stuff in school and in college. Like, we spend all this money and go to college and get these degrees, but I feel like they don't really teach us the stuff that we need to know in order to be successful with money. And so there's a faction of people out there, they make the money, but they don't necessarily know what to do with it. And then there's people out there that they don't have any money and they want some money. And so I think education is a thing that kind of tips that scale.
Totally. How do you think, from like a practical sense, how do you think is when people get stuck with, oh, well, I have this kind of education, so this is the only kind of job I could have, like, from your experience and watching people overcome that, like, what generally is the thinking that they need to have to be able to make the leap towards, well, just because I did this thing, I'm still going to get re-educated, or I'm going to go in a new direction, try something new?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's it. I mean, I just think having a hunger, like, I think you got to want to change, number one. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I mean, I got in TCP because I wanted change. I mean, obviously, you guys were in TCP because you wanted change. You guys are listening to the podcast because you want change. And so I think, number one, you have to want change. And once you have that hunger to change, then you'll start finding the necessary tools that you need to re-educate yourself, whether it's making money or keeping and growing it. And so I think you got to want to change the situation you're in first and foremost.
What do you see happening when someone's like, I want to change, but then they don't actually take action? Like, how, and then eventually they do, right? Like, what do you normally see happens? Is it usually like the pain gets hard enough, or like life throws a curveball hard enough, or like, what's the deal?
Typically something happens, life hits them some kind of way, and it makes you start either planning on new ways to make money. Like right now, a lot of people are getting laid off. Like, it just is what it is. It's unfortunate, but it's happening. But people are either just going to be laid off and try to do unemployment, but there's going to be a lot of people that's going to be laid off and they're going to re-educate themselves, and when they go back into the workforce, they're going to be doing something different. And so I think, to answer that question, I think a lot of times life, unfortunately, we know we need to change, but life has to hit us for us to change. And so, and I'm just speaking from experience. I don't know about you guys. It may not be you, but I think a lot of times life has a lot to do with it.
It's true. And we talk about that on the podcast quite a bit, like the invitation to change is always earlier, and if you don't take some of those exit signs, sometimes the way life hits you harder than what you would have taken on. So from your experience from watching you, like the people that change without the push from, like, what do they usually say? Like, what leads them to do that, or to make the leap, or does it seem like they just sort of self-generate that? Like, is it choice, or?
Yeah, I mean, I think people that do it naturally, a lot of times they've been in that environment before.
So it's placing yourself.
You know what I mean? Like, like some people, they came up, their family has advisors already, or they have a family financial advisor. So if you're a kid growing up in that environment, that's just your paradigm, right? Versus, someone that, they're barely making it, and that's financial advisors nowhere even on their radar.
Yeah.
You follow me? And so I think a lot of it has to do with environment, and again, that's just, you have to want to change your environment. I can't speak for other people, but you got to want to change, and that's it.
That's true, because I actually, that's a really great point from like a practical standpoint of re-educating, because I think a lot of people don't do that stuff because they have the idea of like, I could do something else and I'd be willing to do it, but then they talk to their mom or their sister or their best friend and they're like, why would you do that? You have this thing. Like when Megan was transitioning out of engineering, everybody's like, but it's a good paying job, you have benefits, there's insurance, like there's all this stuff, right? And so that's the environment. We talk about the crab in the bucket analogy of like, when there's one crab, the crab gets out of the bucket. When there's other crabs in with it, the other crabs pull the crab into the bucket when it tries to get out. And then you really have to, when we're functioning as leaders of our life, we really have to ask, like, what bucket am I allowing myself to go in, and what are the crabs in there keeping me towards? Because if you're going in one direction and your environment feels really unsupportive, a lot of times people just sort of crumble to that. They're like, I'm just, okay, yeah, you win. And I do think to your point of like, if you have any inkling, a lot of times it is easier, but we can also self-generate and be like, if I'm not seeing that in my environment, I will go put myself in
Right.
that environment. So I love, it's almost like he's an audience plant. I mean, come to, come to the masterclass. It's free,
Right.
and you'll find all the other crabs that are thinking in this way too. So we'll help you. But yeah, essentially, it's always that has been a big aha. And I didn't plan to take the conversation here, but like for Megan and I, really at each point when we're struggling, we look around and are like, do we have the environment around us that makes this easy?
Right.
Because if no one around us has done this, and if they're all doubtful, then I need to find a different bucket to put my little crab self into. So, yeah, that's a really cool, because those voices are quite loud.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, like what we're doing right here, I mean, it's easier to woo in this environment than it is out there. You know what I mean? And so,
Exactly.
your environment has a lot to do with how you're going to move forward. Now, the good thing about today is you can figure out any environment just by getting on the internet. You can get on YouTube.
So
You
true.
can, I mean, there's so many. You got your phone. You can change your environment. You could start. When you were a kid, you had the dream in your brain. But nowadays, you can literally get on and say, I want to go to Thailand, and you can literally look at it, and you can start dreaming about it, visualizing. You can. Again, start educating yourself that there's other stuff out there that you don't have to necessarily stay in that environment.
That's so true. Yeah, because people a lot of times will be like, well, I can't do something, and they'll say it as fact. And then, but what's cool about doing the job that we do, where we talk to a lot of people, is that you end up coming across people who are like, look at the same scenario and then just say, well, I'm not buying it, I'm going to make it happen anyways.
Right.
And it really highlights over time the ability to just because if you're like, well, I didn't grow up in an environment with financial advisors, I didn't have a great money story, well, you can just go and change your mind at any given point. So that right there is a very cool, like, reality of this. So I think that's the saving grace, because I mean, both you and I grew up in very impoverished,
not
sort
ideal
of
environments for success.
Yeah, exactly. That's a really PC way to say it. I love it. Okay, cool. So that actually, we pretty much already transitioned over to the woo. So that was kind of the practical, like the options that people come up with when it comes to making or keeping money is a matter of thought, right? If you don't like it and you're continuing to do the same stuff, then it's time to expand that dynamic intentionally. So that's where the re-education and the environments really come in. And so then woo, we're talking about when it comes to making it and keeping and growing it. Now this is where it gets actually really fun, because this is where we can either create wealth from our consciousness or miscreate it and actually inadvertently end up pushing it away. And a big portion of what Jamael and I were talking about as we were prepping for this, that we see a lot of times, is the interplay of creation between putting in the work and actually enjoying life and creating pockets of rest and sleep. Because essentially from our take is that when we are constantly acting, like working a lot and hustling till our eyeballs bleed, a lot of times it's the actual answer to the mindset of I'm not good enough, and I have to prove, if I make the money, then I'll have the evidence to prove that I'm good enough, and then I'll be able to rest. So it's like, it's really, a lot of times we have to look at the overworking as fueled by the insecurity. And when we create from a place of insecurity, the things that the universe then offers back to us is a product of insecurity.
Very true.
And it's not often what we want to see. So what has been your experience with learning? I know you've mentioned before, like you came from a place of overworking and kind of the putting in a lot of the time and doing the hustle, which, same, so I can really relate. But how did that transition go? How did that?
Yeah, I think to your point, is one of the biggest things I learned was to rest. I think a lot of times if you're an entrepreneur, it's just go, 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 go.
Mm-hmm.
But the thing that I've learned on the woo side of that is your most powerful time to create is when you're asleep. And so if you're not getting adequate rest, we can't make the money we want to make. We can't create what we want to create. We can't, it's hard. And I've been there. I was sleepy all day trying to drink coffee all day and espresso shots. And, And if you really think about that, how can you create any? I mean, you can't even do your job, let alone go create something. You know what I'm saying? If you're tired, you know, you can't go barely do your job trying to stay awake. And so, yeah, I think just us resting and trusting that we are creators and we are manifestors, and that whatever we're wanting to create and manifest, it will come. We just have to be patient and know that it's on the way.
How does fun then? Because sleeping, like for me, that
That's
wouldn't
true.
sell me, right? Because like me sleeping, not that exciting.
That's true.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think part of having fun is those good feelings that you have when you're having fun, right? Because
Hmm.
part of manifestation and creation is the feeling that you have, right? And so I think the more you're having fun and enjoying yourself, the more you're going to create those good feelings, which in turn creates the manifestations or
Hmm.
whatever that you're trying to create. And so, I think you definitely have to have fun. I'm a recovering no fun guy. Like, I'm trying to learn how to play golf, and funds, to me that stuff just, if I'm not working, I'm not getting ahead. But there is something to us enjoying life. Life is to be enjoyed. I don't
Mm.
think it's to be, just work, work, work. They have golf courses for a reason. They have knitting, whatever you like to do, knitting I don't know what they're doing right now. I see people in the pickleball right now. And so,
Right.
but I think there is something to say that life is not just work. We have to, take time out to make sure that we have an appointment for fun
Hmm.
as well, not just, work appointments, but, we got to have fun so that we can have those good feelings and create more stuff that we want.
Yeah, totally. And how do you, when you see people go from like workaholics to having more money and allowing it to build and create, like, what kind of things do you notice like that they do or that they think, or like what do they all have in common? Do they find pockets of fun? Like, are they more intentional about fun, or are they more creative with fun? Like, what's the deal with them?
I feel like you have to be intentional
Yeah.
because life just gets in the way. I mean, you got this. I mean, especially if you have kids, or you be part of this organization or that organization. So I think, you almost have to have an appointment for yourself. To
Like,
have fun,
actually.
whether it's ladies, go get your nails done or whatever. That may give you those good feelings. Guys, it may be going to a game or something. I don't know, but um, yeah, I feel like you definitely have to schedule that in. I don't think it's something that society has told us that you're supposed to work till I'm dead. I'll sleep when I'm dead. You know what I
Mm.
mean? And so I think it's just ingrained in us that if you're not working, you're not getting ahead. Like everybody, I'm on the grind. I'm on the grind. That's what people say now. But you
Mm-hmm.
know, the grind is the grind, and we got to
Totally.
have some fun too. You know
Totally.
what I mean?
Yeah, and what Megan and I talk about a lot is like how the ability to create discernment. Like, how do you know? Because sometimes you're like, I'm going to rest today, and then you get a really great idea at 3 p.m. and you're like, do I stop my rest day to do work because I'm excited, or would this be overworking? Like, so what has been your experience with using intuition and things like
Yeah.
that to decide?
And that's exactly what I mean. Is it's an appointment to yourself. You know
So
what I
it's like
mean?
not even intuition. So would you say if you said rest day, it's a rest day, just
That's
write
right.
down
You
the
have
okay.
to, and that's hard to do. You know what I'm saying? I'm
Right.
getting better at it, but
Yeah.
it's. I mean, if you don't take a day for yourself, who's going to give it to you? I mean, let's just
Yeah.
be real here. And so, again, I think it has to be an appointment where in your schedule each week you have some time for, I call it the 4S: the faith, the fun, the fitness, and the finance. Faith, family, fitness, finance. Yeah, that's right. But yeah, I think you have to have that time scheduled in there where you can enjoy yourself.
Yeah.
Whatever you want to do. You know what I mean? Not your spouse, not your kids, not your friends. What do you want to do? And again, I think that's where you start, feeling better about yourself, and
Yeah.
enjoying life a little bit better because you're doing stuff you want to do versus what everybody else wants you to do.
Totally. I like share the story of how I spent like 3 months just journaling on what I thought was fun after med school because I had like completely forgotten what any hobbies were. So if any of y'all are like, I actually don't even remember what that is, it's okay if it takes you a second to figure it out again. Like, sometimes you're just coming out of a season where you've been doing too much and can't even remember what you used to do for fun, or it doesn't
Right.
even jive with you anymore. But let's flip this. What if you're like, it's a work day and then you feel like chilling and napping? So what's the deal?
That's an
What's your
appointment,
take
too.
there?
That's an appointment too. It's a work day, so
It's
we need to
okay.
be working. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? So,
So where does intuition come into play, you think?
um, that's a good question. As far as what?
Like this problem, because I think to me, if I had to answer this, I would be like, one layer is the integrity of what you said, and then sometimes intuition raises like more of a red alarm, as like, because I've had days where I'm like, it's a work day, but then I feel so tired I like decide that it's better to nap. But I think
Right.
my filter goes, well, first, what did I say I was going to do? What is the importance and the value of that? And then how does that compare to? So it's almost like it's a combination of intuition and then like a values based judgment, like which one is actually
That's
most
deep.
important. I know this thing has layers, right? Like
Yeah.
it's roots. So and I feel like, a lot of people make that decision, but it's a lot of times it seems like they're making it from the, I am so tired that I don't have a choice, instead of actually being like, what is my sense on what to do? But yeah, how do you navigate that?
Yeah. Yeah. Huh. That's good. Yeah. I think. Yeah, that's good. I mean, because you got on one hand, you got to keep your word, but at the same time, you got your intuition. Um. Yeah. I mean, to your point, I think there's a lot of times where your intuition is so loud where you have to listen to it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like there's times where you got to do what you got to do, but there's times where, it's just like you're driving home and some say go left, and then all of a sudden you don't go left, and it's a car accident, and you're sitting there for 3 hours. And so I
Yeah.
think there is something to using your intuition. I think part of it is us learning to listen to our intuition more.
Yeah, so how'd you do that? Like, what happened there? Or how'd you develop that?
Um, I will say I'm still developing it,
Yeah,
but I mean I think
same.
just meditating, like learning to slow down, um, learning to trust yourself. Like I think a lot of us, I can't speak for you guys, but I think a lot of times we don't trust ourselves. We hear stuff and we know we should make certain decisions, but
Yeah.
we ignore it because we have those bad feelings about it, and we just ignore them or
Yeah.
sweep them under the rug. And so I think just us getting more in tune with our intuition will help. But yeah, that's a tough question,
Yeah.
Alex. I don't know. I mean,
I think to the practice for it, the way I tend to think about it is like the nap in the middle of the day that doesn't cost me a whole lot is a good time to practice listening to my intuition. Because yeah, like sometimes it is the go left and then there's a car accident and you're like, nothing bad really happened to me, but it sure is a good learning point. Maybe just like finding opportunities for safe practice, instead of like, don't do it when you're in launch, or,
right,
or like
right. Yeah,
when
we're not
money's
saying
on the
sleep all
line.
day. That's not what we're saying.
Yeah, but just trusting yourself enough to play around with it, I think was maybe a necessary step for me. Now that like we're talking about it, I'm thinking back to what I did. It's like, because if you don't trust yourself, then you inherently don't trust. So it's like no matter how much you practice, so you have to practice trusting yourself before you can even get to the big enough decisions where it matters, right? But at the same time, I think there's also, when we talk about it this way, every single day you have like 8 million times to practice.
Yeah.
Because literally anything can turn into this question. Like, why am I doing it? Well, yeah. Anyway, so this is really great. I basically do think, though, my life has proven over and over that when I take time for fun, money always comes after.
Yeah.
It may not always be immediate, but it's pretty close.
I mean, I think that's those feelings that a lot of different books and podcasts they talk about is like you having those good feelings is how you create. So when you're doing whatever's fun for you, you're happy, you're smiling, you're high fiving or whatever you do when you have fun. And so that's right. I high five a lot.
Right.
But that's the same feelings that you need when you're creating money. And
Right.
so if you're never putting yourself into those situations where you're having fun, and because a lot of people are like, I don't know how to have those feelings. Well, that's why you need to go have some
Yeah.
fun.
Yeah.
Right? And then just
Yeah.
remember how you were feeling when you had fun, and you
Yeah.
transfer that over to you creating money and manifesting. So
Yeah, I love that. And actually, to those books, can you share like some of your favorites?
right now it's that Richard Dott's Dollars Flow to Me Easily.
Yeah, that's some good
Um,
stuff.
yeah, Wallace Waddles, The Science of Getting Rich. That's a good one. A lot of the classics, Napoleon Hill.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Perfect. Yeah, and those Megan and I have both been reading A Happy Pocket Full of Money. I can't remember
That's a
who
good one too.
David, I cannot remember his last name, but it's a phenomenal book. So yeah, if you are vibing with this topic, those are great books that I know that a lot of us in this field basically reread over and over again. I
Yeah,
mean, I've
seriously.
read Dollars Flow to Me Easily like 12 times already, and I'm
Yeah,
sure
at
I'll
least.
Yeah.
At least.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, cool. So that brings us to our next point that we're going to talk about, which is worry and fear. Because essentially, it seems like for a while, society started to talk about visualizing and thinking about money positively, but where it seems like we continue to lack in the conversation is how you feel about money and how you feel in the moment. And the reality of things is that most people don't have the money that they want, and especially now there's the economy and stuff is not that great, and so the predominant way that how they feel is actually worry and fear about
Mm-hmm.
it. And then that really fuels, like, if we're saying that emotional landscape is the creative power that you have, then worry and fear create a lot of the like miscreation of money in the stuff that you don't want. Like you get money and then your water heater breaks
Mm-hmm.
or your car breaks down or whatever. So with this is kind of a super embracing the and. We're going to talk about both the practical and the woo, but basically what you do with people for the financial plan is the practical answer to this. So
Yeah.
why don't you start there with the
Yeah. I mean, when we're talking about money, I think just having a plan. Most people today, they don't have any plan whatsoever. Like, they don't have any plan. Like, I mean, if you look at social media, people don't have life insurance. That's like a foundation of money. People are in debt. They want to get out of debt. A lot of people want to retire. They want to get wealthy. Well, to do that, you have to invest money. And so to do all three of those things, it requires planning. And most people spend more time planning what they're going to do this weekend than planning their money. And that's just a fact. And so, if you could sit down and get a plan and get on a budget, that would eliminate some of the fear and the worry that you have. Now, it's not going to eliminate it all, but at least you'll know where your money's going. Most people have no clue where their money's going or what it's doing, and so that's what creates the worry and fear. So if we can quell that by putting you on a plan where you're knowing the X amount of dollars is going to this, is going to this, and going to this, then I think that will help you ease some of your tension that you have around money.
Yeah, and that's definitely, that was such a big aha for me when we started working together for you doing my my financial planning with me, is that it's not that I haven't budgeted before, and I've even invested before, but I didn't have like that big lifelong plan, or essentially like when you're younger, these are the things that are relevant, and this is what the plan then necessitates. Kind of like when you're talking about when you have young kids and a mortgage and all of that, creating like getting out of debt, having life insurance, creating kind of plans to catch yourself, and then as things change over time, then not needing some of that stuff because either the kids are grown,
Right.
or you're out of debt, or you own your home or whatever, and to actually translate into like this is how much you would need to save every single month becomes so much more clear. I used to have the goals, but I didn't know how to translate my budget now to where I wanted to be in a way that I could actually like month by month, be
Yeah.
like, this is where this money's going, this is what's happening here, and I know that if I continue this is exactly where I'll be in 3 years, this is exactly where I'll be in 5.
Yeah.
And then it becomes more like my choice. And it did highlight, I've always been more towards the woo on this, because I was always like, yeah, you can just create more money, and that's definitely true, but I've understood so much more the value of what this means, because I think a lot of people do this, like with entrepreneurship, right? They're like, I worry that my business won't be a success. It's like, well, you're the one running the business, so you are largely in charge of how that turns out.
Right.
Like, we can have worry and fear about life doing its thing, but in most topics, that's only a portion of the problem. The rest of it is actually just up to you. So even if life you just switch gears and do something else, or change.
On that point too, plans change.
Yeah.
Like, I think sometimes people, like, you know, when you're just getting started, maybe you're in your your late 20s, you're just buying a house, you're just starting to have kids. Well, that's one plan. You know, you probably don't have very much money. You may be paying student loans, you may have a kid or two, you're buying diapers. And so that's one plan. You may say, man, I can only save $50 a month, but $50 a month is saving $50 a month, right? But then as you get into your 30s, you know, kids may be a little older, or, you know, you may just be having kids. I don't know where you are, but my point is, plans are always changing. You follow me? And so people think it's just this one plan, but no, you got a plan when you're, you know, from 27 to 30, that's a plan. And then you got from 30 to 35, that's a plan. You follow what I'm saying?
Yeah,
and so
that's true.
There's different plans based on where you are. And so a lot of people, they just feel like this is just going to be this one perfect day to start planning, and life don't work like that. Like, you just have to start planning now and, you know, go with what happens. But I think that's the challenge for a lot of people, is they just think it's going to be this perfect day to start doing this planning, and that day is never going to come. And that's why, again, you see, you know, so the statistics with people, you know, they don't have money for retirement. You see people
working multiple jobs.
You know, they got a full-time job and they're door dashing. You know, they have GoFundMe's. They don't have life insurance, because they didn't think it was going to happen to them. They didn't think they were going to get 65, but the reality is, Father Time is undefeated.
Yeah,
you know what
right.
I mean? Life goes on, and so, you know, in there, you know, there are things that we have to make plans for. And I mean, I don't care what you're doing, it typically turns out better if you have a plan. I mean, if you have a party,
so true.
You don't just show up at the party. I mean, you got to plan the venue, you got to plan the balloons, the snacks, the cakes. I mean, so we plan that stuff, but unfortunately, you know, we have challenges as far as planning money. So if you take that party analogy, you know, we did that to our finances, we'd be in a lot better situation. And so, you know, we all got work to do. And so,
yeah, absolutely. And it really, I love that, because I think a lot of people will be like, well, I don't want to get into worry and fear. And this is what I used to do. I'd be like, well, I need to figure out a way to not have worry and fear, and then I'll manifest the money. But honestly, having the tangible plan took care of so much of the worry and fear. I didn't have to do it was like I would have to jump through all these mental hoops to create this illusion of like, I am safe and secure in this world, when like we know darn tootin' we're not. You know what I mean? Like, I could get hit by a bus tomorrow. And so like, I can't overcome that. The plan meets me halfway. Right? Because there's a lot of things that I can manifest, and I plan to, and, you know, in my mind I already have, it's just coming. But at the same time, it's like, I think a lot of times we put on, like, there's a personality flaw. Oh, I'm someone who's worried. I'm someone who's fearful. Well, if you don't have a plan, honestly, that's probably appropriate.
Yeah.
Right? Like, your brain should let you know, you don't have this handled. You might want to get this handled. And then, over time, you actually make more progress. So I think in that sense, you know, as much as we can say worry and fear are bad, but maybe we just say they're only bad if you let them simmer. If you give yourself what you need to resolve them, like a tangible plan, then that's what you should do. And that means that it looks different from different people. I mean, some people have a lot of worry and fear, so they probably need they will feel more resourced with like a pretty heavy duty plan.
Mm-hmm.
And some people just need a little bit, but either way they need something.
Yeah.
So that's a cool one. Now the woo though on this one is like a complete contradiction, it sounds like, but it's not really, which is on some level when you are creating wealth and improving wealth consciousness, your reality lags behind your creation. And so part of it is creating a tangible plan, and then the other side is not actually getting looped into the reality that isn't quite matching where you think you're headed, which is such a struggle. Yeah.
And you can look at the plan. I mean, let's just look at the plan. Let's say you say, hey, I want to have $10 million, but you're looking at my account like, I got $5. And so the woo is knowing I'm going to have $10 million and I'm going to keep taking these steps even though I'm showing $5. Does that make sense?
It does in a way that doesn't make sense, but I think that's why we're embracing the and, because it's so true. Because one of the things that is not even really a topic on money, but the idea of life is not going to give you responsibility for something that you refuse to take responsibility for, right? So it's like if you are meant to be a leader of people and help people, but you are constantly freaking out about your money, like there's an inherent mismatch in who you're being to do that. And so part of it is the bank account's going to keep going to $5 until you're like, actually, I am stronger than this current limitation and I'm going to overcome it. You almost like practice becoming the person first.
Wooing it.
Exactly. But like, it's just so hard. So like, what do you do for when like reality hits you hard? Like, is it come up with a plan? That's
I feel like that goes back to that education. I mean, I feel like so many times, like you mentioned earlier, reading those books, you know, so as you going back to your training manual, like, okay, I'm not crazy. You know what I mean? And so
that's true, because it'll make you feel you're like, I'm manifesting, and then you see the actual bill and you're like, oh my God, I'm insane.
Absolutely.
This stuff is made up.
So I think and that goes back to the environment too. Are you around people that are supporting you trying to move forward with a vision? Or are you around people that say, oh, see, I told you, you know, because that reinforces the negative, versus are you around people that's reinforcing where you want to go positively?
Yeah. Okay. Books, so
they got something
people.
To do with the woo too.
Yeah, definitely. So breathing exercises are like kind of things that like open your heart, kind of like breathing into your heart center things, because I think a lot of times people feel so triggered, it's like a lack of safety, right? Because you're like, my reality it's not matching up with what I'm creating, so then I doubt myself. So finding sort of like some sort of mindfulness practice can help interrupt the process, from what I have found. Although I'm with you on the talking to people, because in some ways it's almost like distracting yourself from reality is helpful.
Right. Yeah. What came into my spirit as you were talking was like turning off the TV, start watching the news. Like, that stuff will keep you worried and fearful if you watch that, right? And so, I mean, one of the things I've done is like just turning on YouTube on some meditation music, some vibes, just positive meditation music, just to take that worry part offline. Because when you're watching the news, man, it's like a plane crashed over here and this happened over there and they got the war and this. You're worried all day and it's unnecessary. And so your mind is your attention is in the wrong place, which is why you're miscreating. So I think part of that is turning off the news, putting yourself in a bubble, listening to books, podcasts like this one, and you know, that'll help you a lot. You know, to keep down. I mean, you're a human, so you're always gonna have worries and fears, but you can reduce them by not inputting worrisome and fearful information into your brain.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and then I think one of the one of the least fun versions of this, but one that I think is really effective, is when you actually just look at your reality and sit with it until it stops triggering you so much. It's kind of like a weird way of exposure there. You know, like if the bank account less than 1,500 bothers you and it's less than 1,500, looking at it and reassuring it, because at some point you keep looking at it, what your brain does is like you start realizing you're like hungry and bored, right? And then you realize like just because it's 1,200, my life is still continuing. Like I'm still just gonna get up and make myself some lunch and I'm gonna go scroll my phone. Like at the end of the day, there's nothing inherently changing in your world just because the narrative in your head. And so I think that's why it's less fun, because yes, distracting yourself or doing meditation or reading a book is obviously a little bit easier, but sometimes leaning into it when something has been a problem for a while seems to take the legs off of it.
Yeah,
right?
I like that. Yeah, just accepting what is.
Yep. And then I think after a while, because our brain's like, okay, well, I'm on to the next thing, then you can sort of it's easier to get to neutral on the feeling of, okay, that's what it is. And then we always talk about this on the podcast here, which is really when it comes down to why do we even care about getting to neutral or changing perspective? Well, that's how your brain can pick up the resources and think of the stuff that actually matters. It's not like, you know, it doesn't have to solve it right then, but at least you'll be in a more resourceful state. And that really matters. Okay. And then we're going to wrap up with essentially the power of the stories that you tell yourself, because inherent in all of this is a lot of self-management when it comes to what's happening between your two ears. Yeah. There's just so much of the old conditioning that many of us have had, where you can very powerfully set intentions that are not in your best interest.
Right.
Yeah.
What do you say, the stories you tell yourself?
Yeah.
I mean, let's go back to what we talked about before. Worry and fear is like, I'm so worried about my kids. I'm worried about the war in Ukraine. I'm worried about... You said the key word, I am.
Yeah.
You're creating that yourself, right? It's a story that you're telling yourself. And so, you know, I think we got to think about what we're thinking about in order to change the narrative that's in our head, because that sucker will replay over, and it will replay the same movie over and over if you're not careful. And
it's true. And I think what happens is that a lot of times we will believe, well, like, why is it a problem, is a lot of times they come true because our feelings about the crappy story are actually more congruent, right? We believe it more, so our feelings are to it. So it's actually more easy to create the crappy story than it is to cultivate the feelings of the new identity, which does make sense on it, right? Because you're changing, so it applies more, it necessitates you having more energy input into it. But at the same time, it's a really good point, because a lot of times you'll prove yourself right. You'll be like, well, unless, 50 people sign up for this webinar, then no one's going to sign up for my program, right? And you get 40, and all of your actions and your energy and flow comes from the belief of then no one's going to join. And then unfortunately, you can really create that in a very powerful, intentional way and make that happen. So we see it all the time. Yeah. And I'm sure so do you.
Yeah, I see it in my business. People say, I can't invest money. Well, you're right. The man that thinks he can, the man that thinks he can, or woman, they're both right, So if you tell yourself you can't invest money, you are absolutely right. But if you tell yourself you can, you're absolutely right. And so, yeah, I see it a lot.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and I think so. Let's break this down practical and woo. For one, I think there's a lot of utility in actually being clear about all the stories you tell each other, because more than likely you have your I'm thinking positively about money, but then what happens the rest of the time? And I think the first thing people want to do is sweep that under the rug because they don't feel that proud of it. So you might as well go pull them out from under the rug and dust them off.
Right.
So I can't invest. What are some of the other ones that you hear about money?
I mean, on the making money side, I mean, going back to the education we talked about earlier, like, they won't give me a raise, or I can't make any more money, or my business. Again, that's a story you're telling yourself.
Yeah.
You start telling yourself, I'm making, like me, I'm telling myself I'm making 600 grand this year in my business. I'm telling myself that. And so you are the story you tell yourself. Eventually you materialize that. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
And so
totally.
it may not be happening right now, but things are on the way. And it's funny how life puts little markers in there to let you know that you're moving in that direction. And so.
Yeah, that's actually very true. It tends to give you feedback. And then the woo side of this, when it comes to like the power of the stories, is that because it translates so effectively, anything that we hardwire, then the more time we spend doing it, the faster it'll translate to reality. So if you've spent, 33, 38, 42 years believing the things that you think, and so those are coming true, then the way that I would look at it is then I have to put in the time to tell myself and build up the new stories. And how do I do that most efficiently? And so Art, just from, you guys have been here around a while, that the brain can't tell the difference between what you visualize and what you actually live.
Right.
And so I know you and I both use visualization as well, and that's why Megan and I have added the hypnosis and the visualization for the money masterclass in with the bundle, because essentially if you don't like what the stories that that you're hearing, so the practical stuff is you go and dig up, I'm telling myself that money's hard to make, that's a rough one, I don't like that. Right. Then you can go and visualize and practice really, really rapidly over like weeks, months, to program in a completely different belief and basically practice. And what's good about that is that your brain can't actually tell the difference.
Right.
So I know you have things that you do for visualization. Do you have any like cool stories of things that have popped out or things that have happened? I mean, I know overall you have the setup that you have that works, but is there any like extra fun little things that popped out?
Yeah, that's a good one. You put me on the spot.
Well, you think about it. I'm going to say, so Megan's, this was Megan's, for everyone listening, Megan's going to tell the story in the masterclass of the lake house. You guys have heard some of that here, but essentially, she visualized the house that apparently did not exist, and a year later, the exact house and the exact location next to her dad's house popped out. So that's the kind of thing that everyone told her, those houses don't get sold. And a year later, she owns it.
Wow, that's awesome.
So, and then we're also gonna, in the masterclass, we'll be telling you the story of kind of behind the scenes of a really high priced mastermind that we joined that essentially had that same, like, it did not make any sense, and it still ended up being wildly successful and stuff like that. So we will tell you all the stories, because half the time you just need to know what's out there and what's available, right? It's anything. Did you think of any?
Yeah, I mean, I was just thinking about how this year is going. Like, I visualized it a certain way, and we talked about earlier in the podcast how, old school is work, right? And we're talking about manifestation and creation. And so, I decided I was going to do my business different this year. I wasn't just going to work myself to the bone 8, 10, 12 hours a day. I'm going to get rest when I need it. And so I've already been seeing great things happening just in this first quarter of the year. I mean, our income is tracking way above where it was last year in January, and I think that's a testament to like the meditation, just slowing down the mind. Some of the things we've been talking about on the podcast is visualization, meditation, hanging around the right people, reading the right books, listening to the right podcasts like this one. I could say just the beginning of 2023 has been
a
good, a good testament.
It does. Yeah, it almost, I do find with this, it like, because you visualize things ahead of time, it becomes so normal that you're like, oh, that's just what life was like. And sometimes the things happening in the moment seem like a bigger deal because, like, you're still getting there, but when you think back, it's like that same process has been happening over and over and over. Your brain believes it so much, it becomes like, I just do have that much money. That's just who I am. So it's like when people get asked, like, oh, what's the exciting thing? Sometimes I have to remind Megan about the lake house story. It is not, she's already living in it. Like, she's on to the next thing, so she doesn't care.
That's awesome.
So, yeah, totally. So this stuff is awesome for that. Okay, so lots more to talk about, but I hope that we gave you lots to noodle on and think about. Thank you so much, Jamael, for coming on here. It was awesome to have you.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so for all of you, if you want to work with who I work with for my financial planning, it's this man right here. So we will put his contact in the show notes, but you can also always just email us, support@zestyginger.com, and we'll send you his contact info. And it's him, and he has an amazing team, and all of them will be able to take care of you and create a plan for you and your family, and just make sure that you are protecting and creating the wealth that you build in this lifetime, and take care of it well. And so, thank you so much for offering that and for being available for our people too. We really, really appreciate it.
Well, I enjoyed it. Thanks for having me, guys.
Yeah, absolutely. And then the other thing is, there are other opportunities since people are losing jobs and things like that. If you know people who are looking to be financial planners, that is also something that is available. So anyways, there's some resources for you or your loved ones depending on what you have going on. And then for Megan and I, what we want you to do is go sign up for the masterclass and plan on either being there live. We'd love to have you there live. And also you can catch the replay if you can't be. So that'll be zestyginger.com/money, and go get signed up. You'll be able to get the audio and start listening to it and be all ready to go by the time we do the class. Thank you so much for joining us today. We're happy to have you, and have a great day.
Thanks for coming out to hang with us on the podcast. It is our goal to transform the way women are treated in healthcare. And we need your help. We need your help to get the word out. We have a lofty goal of 1 million downloads. And we know that as this podcast grows, we're going to be able to reach more women, get more amazing speakers for you, and bring the most cutting-edge information.
If you found these podclasses helpful, please take a moment to text 5 women you know the link to the series. We appreciate your help so much. Can't wait to see you next time.